Takže dámy a pánové, já vás poprosím.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and don't sit on the seats with the green dots. My name is Daniel Morek, and in collaboration with the city of Prague and Ultimate, we are holding this event. 1 year ago, we met on a similar seminar focused on data, and today we are going to speak about the best practices from European cities and Prague. We are going to speak about the trends and expectations in the future. Today's seminar is a celebration of the World Bicycle Day that was announced at the General Assembly of the United Nations. And today, this day is celebrated also in Prague. After this event, at 6 p.m. sharp, you are also invited for a bike ride around Prague. All of you are cordially invited for the active part of today. At the same time, enjoy today's seminar. And now I would like to ask the Deputy Mayor of Prague, who would like to give a few words about today's seminar as well. Good morning. At first, I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers who participate in this annual event. Also, I would like to give my thanks to the speakers who are going to present their experience. On behalf of the city of Prague, I have prepared three items that I would like to speak about. According to calculations, cycling is about 17,000 times cheaper compared to car infrastructure. So the money that we invest is returned back. Recently, over the past 12 months, the mobility in Prague has changed. And not only in Prague, all around the globe. But here, we could see the reduction of car transportation by 50%. But then it started rising again. And when we reached the number of 20%, we reached a breakthrough. Despite some limitations in the city, car transportation was fluent in the city of Prague. And the same figures were also seen in public transportations. However, cycling and cyclists were feeling much safer, and this was a positive feeling from cycling and also walking around the city. And there is an important takeaway from this. Prague has been developing for centuries, and the streets have also been evolving, and these streets were not made for car transportation. We have partly coped with it, but on the other hand, the volume of traffic expected is way lower. So what we need to do is to focus on sustainable transportation, for example, cycling, as and I myself see the biggest potential in cycling as well as railways. And when talking about cycling, I think that we can reach similar results as in Zurich, for instance. In Zurich, the aim and the result is about 7%, whereas this is also achievable in Prague. Therefore, we make a lot of effort to achieve this number. However, in the past, cycling was sort of overlooked. Some may say that we overfocus on cycling, but this may not be the case. However, what I would also like to underscore is the question as to why we don't focus more on separated cycle paths. And the answer to this is that bike lanes of any sort can be allowed in matter of weeks or 2 months, including the project. However, when we are talking about separated cycle paths, this is much more difficult because it has an impact on the historical center of Prague. So we need to find a trade-off. When we launch such projects, we can start from scratch with a cycle path, but when we may disturb the area, this is much more difficult to organize. So thanks for having me here, and I definitely support these ideas. Thank you very much. I am a member of the Prague Cyclo committee. For instance, last year, almost 200 million crowns were invested in cycling, and this is just a clear evidence that Prague is changing. People in Prague are cycling, but still we have yet to achieve the state in Zurich. This seminar today is taking place in a hybrid form, meaning that the majority of people are online, and unfortunately, most of the speakers from abroad weren't able to come. However, we are going to record and stream to today's session, so I will provide you with the link for the presentations and other materials later on. Now, I would like to welcome another member, another guest, who represents the United Nations Center here in Prague. And it is thanks to the UN that we are holding today's event, because it is the International Day of Cycling. I would like to start with an image. So this installation was made by a Chinese artist, Ai Weiwei. You may know him. It's called Forever Bicycle. In 2008, Ai Weiwei created the first of a series of installations in Canada, in Toronto. There was an installation comprised of 3,000 frames, and this photo is from an urban forum from last year. The bike was there a symbol of sustainability, of life in city. And the life there is evolving extremely quickly. Globally, 1.5 million people move from rural areas to urban areas. So currently, more than 4 billion people live in cities, which accounts for about 70%. And it is estimated that as much as 70% of global population will live in cities. So the sustainability is extremely vital. I would like to thank Automat Institute for listening to us and for holding this event. It's really great that we have so many partners, the Prague Foundation, lots of embassies, CAMP and other institutions have joined. I think that cycling and cycling transportation is a symbol of our joint approach and our attitude as regards this interaction between people. Only 2 remarks, however. Something has already been said. The main central topic of today is cycling in the post-COVID era. I would say that a bike is an interesting alternative, even to people who may not thought about it as an alternative. And lots of cities, including Prague, responded to the situation flexibly, coming up with ways that may have seemed unachievable. And another point that I would like to mention is that bike is going to play a very important role in climate change. It's a topic that is really big, but on the other hand, we are focusing on it. And creating such steps and making them into reality is vital. And the bike can be a communication element that can contribute to the improvement. And last but not least, I'm also a cyclist, and I primarily use bike for personal transportation. I don't think that bike should become a part of everyday life. But Ai Weiwei is quite interesting in this respect, because he says that bike is part of his everyday life, that China lives on bike, basically. In the world there is about 1 billion bikes, according to estimations, and about half of these are in China. But in many European nations, bike is considered as part of their identity. I approach it in a similar way. As the other speakers said, the infrastructure is extremely important when talking about safety, but also when we are talking about organization. However, the most important thing is what is going on in our heads as users. But it's also important to consider the ideas of the developers, of the organizers. Thank you very much.
Děkuju moc krát ještě.
Thank you very much one more time for the presentation and for enabling us to hold this event globally. Now we are going to speak with different European cities, now with a colleague from a European bike federation. He's going to speak about trends that were launched at the outset of the COVID era. So I can see the presentation. But let's wait for the presentation on the main screen. So the European Cyclist Federation represents the global movement, let's say, and we also cooperate with other institutions that support cycling. We here in the Czech Republic lobby for better conditions and better infrastructure, as has been said. And today we are going to have several presentations. Now we are going to speak about the European perspective. I'd like to ask the technicians whether we are in touch with Mr. Humboldt.
Okay, I see that my presentation is on screen as well. Good. So, dobrý den. Děkuji za pozvání. I'm very, very happy to be with you, at least virtually. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it was not possible to travel to Prague yet. But I'm very happy to be there with you on this very special day. My name is Holger Haubold. I work for the European Cyclist Federation as a director for intellectual property and data collection. Yeah, I've been living in Brussels for quite a while, but originally I'm German from the Ore Mountains, so about 120 kilometers north of Prague. So I've been there very often, and it's definitely one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I think with more cycling infrastructure and more people cycling, it will be even more beautiful. So let's jump into the topic. Today I will give you some numbers about post-COVID, the COVID and the post-COVID cycling trends. And then also give you a very short introduction about what is happening at the EU level in terms of funding for cycling. But first, a little introduction to ECF. So that's our motto: more and better cycling for all in Europe. We are the European umbrella federation of civil society organizations that work for more and better cycling. We want to promote cycling as a sustainable and healthy means of transport and leisure. And we have more than 60 member organizations from over 40 countries, mainly in Europe. And amongst them is, of course, the Czech Cycling Federation in the Czech Republic. So we are based in Brussels and our roots are in Europe, but the challenges that we face are global. And I think the World Bicycle Day illustrates this very well. So very happy that the United Nations also took up this initiative a few years ago, and that we're celebrating this day not only in Europe, but all around the world today. So about our goals, we want to increase cycling levels in Europe by at least 50% in 2030. And we also want to make cycling safer. So that means to reduce the rate of cyclists killed or seriously injured in road collisions by at least 50%. And I've heard that in the Czech Republic, at the moment, there's a proposal for increasing or having a safety distance between drivers and cyclists, which is currently in the legislative process. And that's, of course, something that we support very much and that we would encourage you also to go through with, because I think it makes cycling feel safer, and that's also what helps make more people cycle. Of course, we want stronger political support for cycling. So cycling should be prioritized by policymakers at all levels as a sustainable and healthy part of the mobility mix. And last but not least, and I will talk a bit more about that later, we want to increase EU funding for cycling to at least 6 billion euros in the next EU budget cycle. The positive impacts of cycling, there are many. So here listed just a few. For example, cleaner air, more road safety, healthier and happier citizens, more livable cities and towns, also better rural connectivity, then greener or more sustainable leisure and tourism options, more vibrant local economies, and more inclusive societies. We have made some calculations on the annual benefits of cycling in the EU. I will not mention all of them, but you see that the numbers are quite substantial, and especially also in areas like, for example, public health, CO2 emission savings, congestion easing. If I understood correctly, the Vice Mayor mentioned that earlier. So if more people cycle, there will also be less congestion on the streets. Then also reduce sickness absence, which is a big advantage for employers, and then also field of cycle tourism. Now to speak about the post-COVID cycling trends. So what we've seen during the last year since the beginning of the pandemic. So what we saw quite early on was that cycling increased a lot. Despite all the measures that we put in place for social distancing, the stay-at-home orders, we saw that cycling numbers increased even in spring 2020 when everything started, and there were a lot of restrictions in place. So here you see an overview of different European cities of the increases. And I think the numbers that I found for Prague, they fit quite well in this. In this story. So also there we saw, or you saw, a big increase in cycling numbers. There are also other data sources that we could use. For example, Google last year kindly provided us with some data on requests for cycling routes on their Google Maps app. And they also saw a huge increase, and that prompted them to introduce new features into Google Maps. So for example, now we can look for bike sharing bikes in real time in the app. So we see a change happening there as well. Also another app which is focusing more on sports or leisure cycling, Strava. They also have their own statistics, and they found big increases in many European cities in cycling levels. Then there's also, for example, EcoCounter. That's a company that places automatic cyclist counters in many European countries and cities. And they also created kind of a dashboard to measure the changes in cycling levels. And they also saw big increases in the levels in almost all countries, except, of course, when very strict stay-at-home orders were in place. For example, here you see Ireland, but in all the other countries, cycling increased really substantially, mostly with two-digit figures. And of course, these increases prompted us then to look a bit at what cities did, because we also got more and more news about temporary cycling infrastructure put in place to allow cyclists to move around safely and to respect the rules about physical distancing. And what we found was quite impressive, I would say. So only the figures that we could get hold of showed that European cities announced more than 2,500 kilometers of cycling-friendly measures, so cycling infrastructure, but also traffic calming or closing off streets. So that's quite a substantial number, I would say. And also they spent quite a lot of money during the last year for these measures and for improving cycling in general. So more than 1 billion euros was spent on that. if you want to have a look, you can find this tracker of the measures on our website. So there's an overview of different cities and of different countries on, for example, how many kilometers of infrastructure they put in place, or how much budget was allocated. And of course, so this increase in cycling levels and also the investments and putting in place of new infrastructure created a lot of attention in the media that you for sure will have seen. So there were big news outlets reporting about it quite regularly, and of course that was very nice to see this interest in the cycling boom that happened. And of course, you could ask the question, well, what was really the impact of these measures? There was a study done by the MacArthur Center for Climate Research in Berlin. So they used our data on the infrastructure and then the data from EcoCounter on the cycling levels. Yeah, they ran some models and some simulations, also take into account other factors. And they found that due to this new infrastructure, cycling levels increased between 11 and 48% in the cities that put them in place in comparison to the cities that did not do anything. So I think that is also quite an impressive result, and it shows that these measures really, really worked, even though they were put in place very quickly. And yeah, I think that's something that we can go forward with. And of course, this then again created quite a media buzz. So this study, yeah, it showed that this was something effective and also something that we should think about going forward with and turning the temporary infrastructure into something more permanent. If we look at post-COVID trends, then yeah, of course, it's a bit early to really say something about permanent changes in behavior, but some surveys have been done, for example, in Germany and in Belgium. And this survey in Germany found that, yeah, at least when you ask people what they want to keep after the COVID era, which changes in their mobility behavior, then most people say that they want to cycle more or that they want to walk more. Of course, there's a bit of a social desirability bias in these surveys, but I think the numbers are so big that there will still be some kind of an effect that we can see. And the same result, almost the same result, came out of a Belgian survey. So also there, people say that after the pandemic, they want to walk more and to cycle more, and they want to keep these changes in their mobility behavior. And of course, we're very happy to see that all these changes, this cycling boom also led to higher recognition of cycling at the EU level. For example, by Frans Timmermans, the executive vice president of the European Commission, who said that cycling is by definition the best way of solving the problem of pollution in cities, and that investments in safe and separated cycle infrastructure networks as part of the national recovery and resilience plans would be a no-brainer and no regret. So we really saw that he was championing cycling in his very influential position. He also joined, for example, a webinar that we organized last October. And yeah, that's a very positive sign. Also that the European Commission took up our numbers on the temporary infrastructure in their sustainable and smart mobility strategy. So they said that, yeah, cities announced over 2,300 kilometers of extra cycling infrastructure, and that they want to double this over the next decade. Now, to the last part, very short introduction to EU funding for cycling. So what have been the developments there over the last year? Just to give you an idea of the numbers. So EU funding will be increased a lot compared to the last financing period, and a lot of this increase comes actually from the recovery and resilience facility, So of the common loans that the EU member states took for the recovery package and to overcome also this economic crisis. So this will be the biggest chunk actually, and then also the more traditional funding streams will also still play a big role. For example, the funding for regional development. So in terms of the recovery and resilience facility, what we did was to analyze the national plans, and that was quite a positive picture what emerged there. So we saw that most of the member states that have already handed in their plans to the Commission, they took into account cycling to a bigger or to a lesser extent, but cycling was there. So you see that, for example, countries that traditionally you would not connect so much to cycling, like Spain or Italy, have quite extensive content on cycling and also committed quite substantial investments. Also countries like, for example, Romania or Latvia. The Czech Republic, in our analysis, we gave it the color yellow. So that means that cycling is included in the plan. There would be room for more, but I think what we saw, so there are 23 million euros of investments that were allocated, and then also I think the introduction of a fund for electric cargo bikes, for example, was mentioned. So these are definitely positive elements. And we hope that this will also lead to increased funding, for example, in other funding streams, in other EU funds, and also national and regional and local funding. About structural funds, so the negotiations are still ongoing about the partnership agreements and the operational programs. Of course, we would like to see multiple explicit references to cycling in the partnership agreements and operational programs. And then there's also the possibility now to have dedicated results and monitoring indicators for cycling infrastructure. So how many kilometers of infrastructure will be supported. And then as a monitoring indicator, the annual users of dedicated cycling infrastructure. So we encourage, of course, to take up these indicators as well in the programs. And then also there should be a link to a national cycling strategy, to have this planned in a coordinated way. From what we've heard, there's also some positive signals there from the Czech Republic of increased funding, and of course we hope that this will go through, and that this will also be linked to a national cycling strategy and to other funding streams. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. Very happy to take questions, if there are any.
Thank you, Holger. Já budu mluvit česky vlastně.
I will speak Czech now. As for the questions, you can ask whether here or in the online stream. I would leave the questions for later on, just before lunch. I just have two things that I would like to say. The recovery plan has been given to the European Commission already, and we have lobbied for explicit mentions of cycling. And as for the financial framework, 2021 to 2027, we wanted as many funds as possible allocated for cycling and infrastructure. I would like to say that we have a lot of support from different embassies, and I'm very glad that we can welcome and Mr. Beckevold from the Norwegian embassy here, and he will talk about two cities, two good examples. First, Oslo and Stavanger. And those are two Norwegian cities that are a good example. And maybe you think that the weather isn't great for cycling here, but in Norway we can see that bicycle is a possibility for every weather. So I'm very looking forward to this presentation.
You can take off the mask.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation, and also for the possibility to say some words about our experiences in Norway. The two first words used by my previous speaker is motivation and priority. And yes, while the presentation is coming up, say that some of you mentioned China. My first mission was in 1979. I was there in Beijing, Peking at the time, seeing all the millions, no car moving in red sun 5 o'clock in the morning. You will never forget what you saw. And also the difference, certainly, to go back to Beijing today. But this is what this is about. It's about motivation and priority. And what we are going to do now is that I must say that coming here to the Czech Republic 2 years ago, often you take things for granted. You think that the nature is there, etc. But what I see is that the Czech people, you use the nature, but you have also fantastic biking possibilities. Often it's taken for granted. Certainly, as all, it's possible to do something more. But also, and I see the problems also coming from Ostrava as a biker. Coming into the city center is more difficult than you come outskirts of the city. It's obvious, and it takes time, and the infrastructure is there. So I said, bike and be happy, be safe. Prague, excellent bicycle. And I must say also, I often use the boats crossing the bridges, and it's just crossing the rivers. And you have also solutions of motorway and the integrated bicycle path. It's an example for other countries. So yes, it's fantastic. Here we should have now up a map of Norway, just saying that my first bike I got when I was quite young, 1962. And it came from the city close to Stavanger, the region approaching today. And it was the key producer of biking in Norway, starting in the 1890s. And then the production started there. And the point is that what we can see when we go to one region, we see that the priority of biking is linked to the policy priority at large. Stavanger is a region, a country which we don't see it for the time being, but it is versus the sea. It's versus the sea and the openness. It's been active in European policies, as mentioned. The first region having a regional office in Brussels, linking everything up to it. And it also has then, it's a smart city, is hosting the Nordic Edge, the biggest event for the smart societies, new solutions in the Nordic region. It's every September. And also Czechs are attending and participating in the conference. And we are working with the Prague city and other cities here to attend. So what is then happening? You also have a regional bicycle strategy. And that's why what we have talked about is that it means that as an output, you have the link from the broad picture down, and you give them the priority as well. I must say that, for example, it was no accident that Oslo become European Green Capital 2019. It was a I worked closely with the city of Oslo for many years on how they worked in Europe. They took initiatives, Eurocities, they worked through the European organizations, and then they got results. And that's also that when you go to the bicycle strategy, it's explicitly said in the priority papers, priority will be given to walking, cycling, public transport over private cars, and be the preferred model of travel. That's in the strategy documents. So it's totally there, and what we can see is that, as you know, we have toll-free if you have an electrical car. We have to pay quite a lot if you drive a petrol or diesel car. And what we see as the funds coming in together with our money, it means that you get funds to have a better public transport, but also to develop the bicycle networks. It has a very great impact in that extension. So it said here in the papers from the Oslo city I received, the toll ring in Oslo makes it more expensive to drive, makes it more expensive to choose car than electric car, and finances public transport and bike lanes. Yes. So, but instead, I will also say that, thank you, I will also say that the Stavanger region have the same. Because there you have also the regional strategy, and they also have a regional, and often you see the commuters have to have a safe parking for the bikes, etc. And they had a regional strategy from 2017 to 2032. Here you can see, and I was very impressed by the Czechs. How you used masks. 98% used the masks during the time of COVID. Very good. Fantastic. And you see the solutions I mentioned, and also the bridge there. That was taken last weekend. Very hot day last year. Fantastic biking possibilities. And here is the guy there. And then I got my first bike coming. Then, as I said, from this region, from Stavanger, Sandnes, where you have the Norwegian production ongoing. So we are talking about Stavanger and Oslo today, and that's quite a scarcely populated country. As I said, the climate strategy, you saw, I read out the text, totally integrated as such, and as part of it. But what, and you can see that you also then got the clear-cut task to move on. And you can see here that the goal is clear in the Oslo strategy to increase from 8 to 16%, the increase, more to use bikes, new bicycle lanes, and also what has been mentioned, the health effect is important. Here is calculated to euro 2.5, quite a lot, for each kilometer. And so far, there's been a considerable increase. And it's also the safety aspect. During that period, from the appearance of being safe increased from 9 to 28%. So, then we come to the key issue, the motivation. And here we have a video. I don't. Can we start the video, please? Up in the first video, up in the corner. Everything is in the mind of the persons. And this is from the Stavanger municipality, made this demonstration video. So if you take the first video up, please. The sound is up in the corner. Yeah, you got two videos at the same time, so it's a little confusing. But what you can see here is the main aim of these two videos is to demonstrate that it's easy to use, you get training, and it's about willingness. So we will put these up, these two videos. We handpicked them from loads of videos. But it could then be that you can see it is from Stavanger, the first one, and the other one was from the municipality of Oslo. But the point here is that what happened? The people in Oslo said, when the people working with Oslo said to me, when the pandemic broke out, the message was as follows: do something. Make your dreams come true. Here, and they said to me from the office in Oslo, yes, we had the plans ready. The same goes for Stavanger. So it was get people on their bike and quick. And they said that's not only what you had already planned, but also what was in your heads. And one thing was also that you had to then to go back to basic, really to make a checklist, quite simple, to see what is people facing as challenges. Why don't they bike? So they took the step back, made the checklist, and then they also saw that they also have to use various aspects. So here, safe, easy, parking, not least, not only in city centers, but also on commuter places. Nudging, just a little push. If the video of these tires had moved on now, we would have seen that we have a system where we have supported for winter tires. But bike ambassadors, those biking, would continue further. So let's then go to the Corona actions. For the summer, it was, as we can see, pop-up bicycle repair outlets, free repair, close. I have a bike in the basement I'm not proud about, which has been there. I didn't manage to, it's there, and it's been there for 5 years, sorry. Yes, access, support local districts immediately. Also then in the autumn, start using a bike, web, 300,000 persons. Ostrava is a city of 700, 300,000 reached. New road guidance for bikers. And that's very, very good systems, setting up wayfinding, so people in new areas can find their way through. Here you have the fantastic mappy. I love it. Winter, financial support, access. This is very important because it was possible then to get dubbed tires. I come back to that later. And then they paid 150 euros up to 50% of the cost covered. Free bike service for municipal workers. Trailers, motivation, we have seen some of them. I hope you can have a look at them later. Barbara, helping me, Janutova, prepared it together. So he just helped us and translated them into English. Fantastic, thank you. City bikes with studded tires. We have winter conditions, need studded tires. And visible where to bike safely. So this is, and there is one issue which was not mentioned in my slides, but is stressed. It's the infrastructure, meaning the road regulations, one-way lane, barriers, it could be extension of the bike lines, and then also to have new fences built in order to separate better. By the way, the Stavanger municipality has a very nice slide showing that you have to take care and not bike too fast, especially when we have mixed both pedestrians, a small child telling, please take care of me. So it's quite fantastic to see. Just concerning the funds, say that in relation to the Stavanger plan, it's on something like 3, for the 10, 50, 12 years, something like 3 billion euros. Of that, 140 million euros has been spent on the highway for bikers. And then it said, we have 100 million more during the period to spend on other additional initiatives for biking, promoting biking. So it means that you have the plan, you have the money. So what we can see here, before the winter came, people were very resistant, not resistant, but hesitant, whether they should go biking or not in the winter. They were afraid of roads with snow, slippery roads. And what you can see, I am the same. My weight, go biking without spikes. Even with spikes, I'm hesitant, to be frank. But here you can see that after you have used it one season, the roads with snow, no problems. Slippery roads, no problem. And here the statistics here from the Oslo tells us that those who have received the support say that it was 70% said that the support from the public was necessary. Otherwise, they haven't changed tires. The second is that 85%, nearly very much, say that they will recommend winter biking to the others. And then 90% says that they will bike the next winter. And I'm happy also to say that the women are more than men using the support. That's very positive. So, I mean, it just shows that, and then we talk about nudging, we talk about ambassadors. But here we see the string from the policy down to the bottom line. It's a red thread that is integrated, embedded. I must say that I interviewed the smart city general of Stavanger. And I said to him, what do you do? How do you include the regions around you? You know, how do we work? He said, I go to each local municipality. I stay in the hotel there and sit together 3 days a week to make combined plans. That's on the city planning. But it means bicycles is also part of the plan. So everything is then tried, this total smart city concept, and see that as a frame how to work. Yes, we have already been presented figures, and I have got so many slides. I just present a simple one. And it just shows what we would like to see increase. That's very positive. And I also got a report from Stavanger that same levels as before lockdown, but as at the level of biking, but most likely high increases. So it means that the bike have been on the same level, but people have had home offices. And even with home offices, the biking has been, so it's most likely high increases there too. So what's on? Yeah, thank you. Just say to you that the point is in the motivation. Sitting in the heads. Continue the same, work really concretely and sincerely to get the good results. And as I said here, it's also to get the fun of biking and be safe when you use the bike when you can use it. I would just say also that we put on this. I should have put it on, but it's a little late, so I don't do it. But naturally, we take great fun also as an embassy to take active part in the biking. So, and also then to be participating in these bike to work as we just concluded. I would say that thank you, and I must say that biking is really in the heart, and here are the contact persons, which have worked very closely, both in the Stavanger municipality, Roar Børresen, and also big thanks to you, Liv Jorunn Andenes. Both of them are sitting, so if you have any more details about the plans, structures, and details, they will provide them to you. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a very good conference today. And this is an issue, as you can see, I'm burning for. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for inspiring.
Well, thank you very much for
the bike ride today, or somebody from your embassy.
Be there.
Okay, great. V souvislosti jenom chci zmínit.
connecting to this and the previous presentation. I would like to say that, well, Czech Republic will be preceding the EU next year. And our colleagues who are preceding this year are still telling me and asking me about my plans. So now we will go to the change of traffic behavior. I'm very glad to see Hanka Bruhová here, and I haven't seen her for 15 years. And she's at the university from Ústí nad Labem, and I think that they are the first one who are concerning this theme. So.
Poledne všem.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and for allowing me to tell you something about our research into COVID and its impact on transport behavior. It appears not to be working. Now it is. My name is Anna Bruhová-Foltínová, and I am a coordinator of a team Transportation and Mobility, which is a team under the Economic Policy at the Jan Evangelista Purkyně University. We are a new team, and its members are senior researchers. We look at mobility from the perspective of social sciences. Should you be interested more into our activities, I would recommend taking a look at our websites where we publish our results and research. What I'm going to speak about are the outcomes of the project, changes to transport behavior as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, supported by the Technological Agency of the Czech Republic in terms of the ETA program. It's a 2-year project that is going to come to its conclusion in the middle of the following year, and all the data and the results will be publicly available. Our consortium is our team, as well as the Stenmark company, which focuses on public polls and public surveys. The idea of the project is to focus on several research topics, the first of which I'm going to speak about. It is generally the investigation of the behavior during the pandemic. And if we also manage to acquire the data, also behavior in the post-pandemic era, we would like to identify the main factors as well as the main impact of the pandemic on our behavior. We also deal with public transportation, where we are interested in personal barriers and in eliminating the barriers in order to increase the attractiveness of public transportation. Another topic we focus on are analyses of aggregated outputs, and in the end we are going to hold several interviews and presentations in order to present best practices. Based on the outcomes, we are going to issue a public report. As regards our target groups, this is people from urban areas at the age of 18+. There are several types of commutes, which is commutes to work and to school, then commutes for shopping and leisure commutes and leisure traveling. We cooperate with the University of Smart Mobility Research Center. So let's have a look at the methodology. Our research question was connected to the long-term impact of the pandemic on behavior. We strive to work with a panel of respondents that we have been following for the past 2 years. Originally, 3, waves were planned, and in the end we carried out 2 waves or 2 sets of surveys last year. First, at the beginning of June, when we asked about the behavior before the pandemic, during the lockdown, in April, and then expectations after the pandemic. Another survey took place in September, when we actually focused on the real behavior. And during the third acquisition of data, that ended a couple of days ago, and I've managed to evaluate some and process some of the data, so I'm going to speak about the results as well. In there, we collected the data during the lockdown in May this year. The last collection of data is expected in October or November, and we hope that we'll be able to observe how life is moving to its standard form, so to speak. The sample should be representative when it comes to income, gender, age, and about 1/3 of the respondents are from Prague. Another third are from the distance of 16 kilometers from Prague, and the remaining part are from regional large cities above 20,000 citizens. So just quickly, let's have a look at the results. Speaking about the behavior when it comes to commute to work and to schools, in the upper part of the figure, you can see the first two waves from last year, which was gathered during the lockdowns. Here, I would like to illustrate the fact that there were differences between the individual lockdown waves, lockdown periods, when it comes to behavior. In the spring lockdown, activities were much more limited than in the autumn. From the point of view of commute to work, we can see a similar range of people where half of the people was working from home, whereas in autumn it was more than 60%, something above. Some of them worked less, which you can see in the orange column, and as regards the remaining parts, those were people who were on forced leave, sometimes unpaid leave, or people who lost their job during the pandemic, which accounted for about 5% of the sample. In autumn, these numbers were slightly lower. When talking about the place of work, the data are in parallel, meaning that in autumn the numbers were more limited. About half of the people worked from home. In autumn it was more than 60%, partly from home, and then a little bit more in autumn, so the mobility was higher. And about 30% of respondents worked from home in autumn, whereas this number dropped by autumn. Using this figure, I would like to demonstrate the behavior before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and expectations after the pandemic. All this data was received from the spring survey. The public transportation had the worst results. From 50%, originally it dropped to 20%. When talking about cars, the level was stable or slightly increased, specifically the rate. And what had increased was home office or a fairly considerable amount of the sample did not work. In spring, there was certain optimism that everything was going to come back to ordinary life. And the expectations were as follows. The majority of people moved back to their prior behavior, but there was a decrease of the use of public transportation. This wasn't expected to come back. However, when we are talking about cars, if we take a look at company cars, our own cars, carpool schemes, the rate is more or less the same as prior to the pandemic. However, non-motorized transportation had increased slightly. It's one single category in our methodology, so this comprises of cycling and walking. As regards the expectations, it was expected that home office would increase. Here I would like to show a comparison with Israel in terms of the same data, meaning cars, public transportation, non-motorized traffic, and miscellaneous. The basic structure of modal split is different, considerably higher. They have a higher rate of cars, a lower rate of public transportation. The trends go hand in hand, basically, and it's a more or less stable rate, meaning that an increased use of cars and a drop in the use of public transportation, and a slightly increased use of non-motorized transportation. This is the last slide regarding commutes. From the people talking about non-motorized transportation, here we have the absolute numbers, meaning 173 respondents. The columns are as follows: during, after, person during, and person after. And everything was happening in a very similar way. So a considerable amount of people actually moved back to cars. Whereas about people using originally public transportation, they moved to non-motorized transportation, and some of them also to motorized transportation. About 91% of people actually used non-motorized transportation also after the COVID era. So I would now just like to summarize the outcomes. As regards the commutes to work, the rate of non-motorized transportation is fairly low, below 20%. And we can probably expect the highest rate of public transportation. However, we can expect an increase in home officing, but only, say, partial home officing, meaning 2 to 3 days a week. Here, I would like to say that based on literature from abroad, the fact that somebody moves to home office, it doesn't necessarily mean that it affects the volume of transportation, because these people travel more often and make different sorts of commutes for other purposes. When it comes to the volume, the data don't indicate any specific marked changes when compared to the pre-pandemic era. As regards commutes for shopping, we distinguished between 2 types of shopping, meaning necessities and inessentials. Here, the behavior is also fairly conservative. 50% is performed by cars, 50% more or less by public transportation. And again, the data don't indicate any marked changes. We can expect, however, a slight increase in online shopping, especially when talking about inessentials. The last commutes that we researched are leisure commutes, leisure trips, and we generally distinguished between 9 types. 4 are, say, online, 5 are outside our homes, and people plan on taking more trips than during the pandemic era, especially activities outside our households. And in particular, when talking about younger people as well as people with children, about 40% of these trips are by cars. And the non-motorized transportation accounts for only 15%. And the data indicate a decrease in this area. The last 2 slides I'll go through just very, very quickly. This is the data from the 3rd wave, from the 3rd period, specifically because this event. We were focusing on trips on a bike during the pandemic and after the pandemic. We specifically focused on commute to work, short trips around the city, around the living area, outside the living area. And it can be seen that about 70% never used the bike in this to go to work. And about 38% didn't go for any trips on a bike. And this is the last point. We were also interested in the subjective understanding of dangers when in the context of COVID regarding specific places and specific ways of transportation. Basically, everyone said that from the viewpoint of the pandemic, bike is not dangerous. only 8% of people said that it was dangerous from the viewpoint of the pandemic. And it was similar to the movement in public areas. Regarding the two last questions, we were interested in the approach of people to building up new cycling infrastructure. It seems that this is not a controversial topic because about a half of the respondents agree with building up further infrastructure. About 1/3 of people is indifferent. When we are talking about the regulation of car transportation, the support is logically much lower. But still, actually, some people think that we should regulate car traffic in urban areas. So I think that, however, it's important to support sustainable mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, you could see, taking a look at the numbers, how the individualization of transportation is changing. I would like to postpone the questions for my colleague, because now we are going to have a presentation from the Netherlands. We are going to speak about segregation and integration of cyclists, and this is what the following presentation is going to be about. We are going to speak about the Dutch experience, the challenges, and other issues.
Hi, Marilyn. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So you will present yourself?
Yeah,
okay.
I will present myself. And
All
I
right.
try to share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Is it working?
Not yet.
Share. Oh, yeah, I need to press the button share. Now it's working, I hope.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks.
It's amazing what is working. I am very sorry that I cannot be with you today, but I'm very happy to be with you via this Zoom connection. I like to speak a little bit about history of how Amsterdam was changed to make it better for cyclists. And in the end of my presentation, I will go a little bit into the COVID measures that we have in Amsterdam as well. But many of the measures that other cities are taking now, Amsterdam has taken in the past, I think. So, well, let's start with my presentation. My name is Marjolein de Lange. I'm a mobility urbanist. I have an independent consultant company. And I'm an advocate at the Fietsersbond Amsterdam. That's the cyclist union in Amsterdam. And I want to focus on main streets in cities, especially in Amsterdam, because when we started our bicycle policy in Amsterdam, that was in the 1970s, we soon, well, I say we, but it was the Cyclist Union. I was a little child by then. But we found out that main streets were the most difficult to improve. In main streets were the largest challenges and problems for cyclists, but they were also the most difficult to improve. After 40 years of bicycle policy, we can say that most streets in Amsterdam, including the main street, have really been improved for cycling. And how did that happen? Well, this is a picture from 1978 in Kinkerstraat, a street of about 22 meters wide. And you can see the difficulties for cyclists, but not only for cyclists, also for public transport and for pedestrians and even for cars, because there was a lot of congestion in streets like this. Many functions and little space in those sorts of streets. If we go back a bit further, how did this happen? Amsterdam made an extension plan to enlarge the city with areas around the existing city, and that would be for 1 million people by 2000. And the idea was, so this is quite important for Amsterdam and an advantage for Amsterdam, the enlargement, the extensions of Amsterdam would not be further away than 30 minutes by bike. So in 1935, the city planned a larger city, but within cycling distance. And that's special for Amsterdam. And that's an advantage, because if the distances are larger, then cycling is not so good an option anymore. In these new areas, the city was planning not only for cycling, but also for the car, because the car was an upcoming vehicle by then. And in the existing city, the car had sometimes problems. In the new areas, the main streets would have protected bike lanes, and they were even 3.50 meters wide, but also quite a lot of space for cars. And this is what you can now see in these areas of Amsterdam, large streets for the main roads with good bicycle facilities. In the existing city, by then, the streets were different. The streets were more narrow, 15, 20, 30 meters wide. And these black lines, they are the main streets in the city that were problematic already in 1930. With growing numbers of cars, growing number of road traffic, we see that the city saw that these streets are problematic, they have congestion. And to improve that, there was a plan made to widen up streets in this city. And that could only happen by breaking down houses or by filling in canals. And some of these measures have been implemented. For instance, this street, Vijzelstraat, it was a narrow street with a tram line in 1910. It was widened up in the 1920s to make more space. And in the 1970s, it filled up with cars. There was space, so when we got more and more cars in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, streets like this would also be filled up with cars. So this was a temporary solution. Another solution, another road change was Weesperstraat, the main road from the southeast. It was a narrow street. You already see how narrow and busy it is in 1952. And it was widened up when the metro was being built. So the houses were breaking down again to make a large 4-lane road on top of the metro line. This plan, so this one was finished around early 1970s. And the idea was to continue this street. This is a main arterial road that was built. The idea was to continue it towards the city center and also make a ring around the city center. But then we had the early 1970s and people were getting more and more protesting about this overwhelming influence of cars in the city. Here you see this stretch, that's the stretch of the metro line, and the houses have been broken down to build the metro line, and the metro had to be built because it was connecting to a new area of the city outside of the town. This metro line was a strong debated about what are we going to build on top of it. At first, the plan was to make a 4-lane road on top of this, but in 1971, the city council had to decide about it. There were people in favor of it, but there were also parties against it. And only in one vote difference, the city council decided not to build this 4-lane road, but to build back the original street, or the street with original width. So that was only one vote difference. It was not a large majority, but it was a small majority that said, no, we are not going to build a 4-lane road through the city. We are going to build, this is how it used to be. The metro line was built, new houses were built, and the width of the street is the same as it was before the metro line came. And nowadays, it's like this. And nowadays we see that about the same number of people move in this little street on bikes and on foot and some cars as they would have moved on a 4-lane street in cars. So the city decided we are not going to open up further for large car roads. We are making something different. So in 1971, this decision was made, and then it was clear the city had to change. They cannot adapt the city to the car, so they have to adapt the mobility to the city. And that was done slowly and step by step with several policies. For instance, the policy of the bicycle network. This street, which is in the west of Amsterdam, is a main street, and here you would also like to have fewer cars, more space for cyclists and pedestrians. But that cannot happen overnight, because to make that, you have to rebuild the street. That's expensive, and it takes a lot of discussion how to do it. In the meantime, there were cyclists, and it was dangerous for cyclists. So this bicycle network plan from 1982 had included those main streets with the idea, when we have time, when we have money, we will rebuild them. But in the meantime, we have also, and that's the smaller lines, we have the smaller lines, the alternative routes to neighborhood streets, to make some neighborhood streets, improve them for cycling so that cyclists have an alternative, as long as the main road is not good enough. But then 10 years later, the city finally had time to redo this busy main road. And there was lots of discussion about it. Finally, it was decided to make a free tram lane and to make protected cycle paths. And how did they find the space for that? The space was found by taking out one direction for cars and also one lane of parking for cars. So if you take out one direction of cars, that's this one, and the parking of cars, then you find space to have a bike lane, that's this one, a bike lane, cars, parked cars, driving cars, a free tram lane, and here a bike lane, deliveries and footpaths. And here there was some extra space found because under the renovated buildings, a footpath was found. So a little bit extra space, and the most extra space came because the space of cars was reduced. It took a lot of discussion to get this image. Shop owner said, we cannot have it because we will lose our customers. And people living there that had cars said it's not impossible, but the city council decided finally after long debates, and it has been renovated in this way. Now we see that the bike path that was installed by them is only 1.80 meters. It is close to the overpass where the footpath is. And nowadays we see more and more cyclists on the bike path, and it's getting busier, it's getting overcrowded on the bike path. So for this street, Amsterdam is working on the next level step, and that means reducing most car parking, but mixing cars and tram, cars in one way, and a bike lane instead of a segregated bicycle path. And this area is only for deliveries, not for parking of cars. So this is very exciting. How is it going to work? Because some people say, it may be scary to cycle here if cars are parking, cars are moving in and out of this parking zone. Others say, well, it's wider, and now we have 2.50 meters instead of 1.80 meters. There's also more space for pedestrians. So this is a renovation, the next step. It will be implemented, I think, next year. So then we will see how it will work. In the meantime, between 1990 and now, the number of cars on this street has decreased. So less cars on this street, and that has helped that it may be possible. Another example of a main street is Bilderdijkstraat. In 1978, you had a mixed area for all traffic, more or less. There's a footpath, and then you have the parking zone, and here cars and bikes and trams more or less mix. When more and more cars came to the city, it became more tight for cyclists, especially they ride between the parked cars and the driving cars. And then we decided the city decided, what are we going to do to improve safety for cyclists, because it was unsafe for cycling. On a street like this, with the volume of cars that is there, you need segregated bicycle paths. And after a long discussion, they were built. But a big issue was the place of the trees. The ideal place for a segregated bicycle path would be just here, in the line with the trees, but you cannot move the trees. And they were very well loved. So finally, it was decided to make the bike lane just in between the footpath and the trees. And it's again a 1.80 meter bicycle path, a footpath, bike path, the trees, parking zone, and then the car lane, a free tramway, and the same on the other side. Protected cycle paths make it good for cycling. There's an extra verge against it, next to it. And what we see is also opposed to here, where cars can easily move in and out the side streets. Now we have elevated entrances at the side streets. Cars that are moving in and out of the side street have an elevation here, and that means that the footpath, the bike path, and the footpath have the priority and also the safety, because the speed is reduced by this elevation. The trees remained in this street. This is more or less this idea of segregating when needed and mixing when possible is the idea of sustainable safety. And that's been an important help for Amsterdam and other Dutch towns to improve safety for cyclists and for the whole traffic in the Netherlands. The idea of sustainable safety is that streets are inherently safe. Cars and bikes can mix when there are few cars and the speed is low. So that means less than 6,000 cars per day and the maximum speed of 30 kilometers per hour. And cars and bikes must be separated if there are more cars or the speed is higher. Also, the policy is to concentrate cars on main roads so that neighborhoods are quiet. And the next level development is that we also want to have 30 kilometers per hour on main roads. Here is another example of a street renovation. This is not part of the main network for bicycles, but it is part of the main network for cars. So there are quite a lot of cars on this street. About 20,000 per day. And because there are so many cars, Sustainable Safety Program says then you need segregated bicycle tracks. So there's the protected bicycle tracks are installed in 2015, around 2015. The whole street was renovated by them, and car lanes were narrowed, and that also made space for the cycle path, but also for installations like this, so that cyclists from a quiet street in this neighborhood can easily cross. Cyclists and pedestrians can more easily cross than on a wide street like this. This is a measure that you can say this is not good. Or this can be problematic for a main route for cars, because if you reduce the space for cars, do you have enough capacity for cars? Well, what we see here is you can reduce the space of the cars for the cars in the sections, as long as the main reason for the flow of cars, which is also quite important in Amsterdam. The cars must not be congested too much. the main focus for flow of cars is not at the sections, but is at the intersections, at the traffic lights. So here we have one lane in each direction for cars. At the intersections, there are often 2 or 3 lanes for the different directions. So there you make some, if you make some extra space at the intersections, you can reduce the space on the sections and make it safer for cyclists and pedestrians on those kinds of sections. Right. The results. After 40 years of building Bike City, we can say that about 90% of streets have a safe layout. Some are narrow, and we want to widen that up. We get more cyclists because of the infrastructure. That's my strong belief, that because we made safe infrastructure in nearly all streets, cycling is doable for nearly everyone. You can have cycling not only for the strong and the courageous cyclists, but also for children, for mothers and fathers with children. Cycling should be doable for all and should be safe for all. That's the policy of Amsterdam, so you need to make your infrastructure safe. That helped to make safer infrastructure, helped to make it, to get more cyclists. And nowadays we see more cyclists need more space. So that asks for new street layout. And some streets are still a long-lasting challenge. For instance, this Van Bouwstraat. If you ever come to Amsterdam and you enjoy the good bicycle infrastructure, do also check Van Bouwstraat, because that is still a street which is quite problematic, where you have to cross the tram tracks if cars are parked double, etc. But then you have to be fast, because in 2023 or 2024, this street will also be improved. All right, did we have something about COVID and cycling? Am I still doing right with time? Oh, sorry, I'm a bit slow. Well, lots of measures that citizens are taking now have been taken in Amsterdam already. In Amsterdam, some streets, we have taken a counter direction where there was a bicycle track. The city thought maybe cyclists and pedestrians are too close together on a bicycle track here. So let them mix cyclist and car. So there's more space for the pedestrians. At this street, this didn't work out well, and it was reversed, the measures, because it was too many problems. In another street, it worked well. This was the street Haarlemmerstraat, where there used to be a lot of car parking and lots of cyclists and pedestrians, and now the cars have been taken out because of COVID measures, and that gives a lot of extra space. Challenges for main streets. Well, if you have too wide street, it's problematic. If the street is wide, then you should include a protected cycle path from the start, like in the new areas of Amsterdam. Improving alternative cycle routes while main streets are still difficult. A policy is needed to improve your city. A road safety program is needed, and a national road safety program, or maybe even a European road safety program, should help in this perspective. Less space for cars and reduce the number of cars is important. Parking policy for cars is important, and that helps a lot of to get space and to get income. That's about it. Well, this is a brief presentation about main roads. If you want to know more about how Amsterdam became a bicycle city, I recommend you the book Bike City Amsterdam. In the website, you can also see a lot. And there's also, since a couple of months, the knowledge platform Amsterdam Bike City, platform for knowledge and innovation about cycling. You can find it on this website. And if you click here at visit, you can see several means to visit Amsterdam. And one of the things you can do is partake in a bicycle meetup, an online bicycle meetup that will, the first one will be in 25th of June. I will share this link with you shortly. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Marjolein. You can hear the applause.
Thank you.
It was very interesting. There's, I don't know if you are aware, this year the Velocity conference, which is happening in Lisbon. I think it will be also a very good example for Prague, because it's a, I see there was lots of construction in Amsterdam in the 50s and 70s. Prague is a very historic, city under UNESCO protection. We have a little bit different conditions, but the communists tried to also build some big thoroughfares in the city center, so we can definitely learn from your examples. We will take some questions later if you agree before lunch.
Yeah,
will you be available?
I'm sorry. I have another appointment. So
okay.
Questions are different. You can ask questions via my email address.
Via chat, yeah, or email address. Okay.
Chat. And I'll stop sharing, or did I stop sharing? I'm not sure.
Yeah, stop sharing. Yeah, stop sharing.
Yeah, but I have to check out how to do it. Sorry.
Okay, take your time. We will speak to the audience in the meantime.
Yeah.
Takže, dámy a pánové, teďka se...
Ladies and gentlemen, as we are forwarding to data collecting, we will move to the Czech Republic, and we will present two presentations, one of Luboš Kala, who is the director of Foundation Partnerství, and he is and then we will have the presentation of David Horacio and about data counting in Prague. So, Luboš, the floor is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to ask you at the beginning that COVID has affected traffic in the Czech Republic. Do you think that the cycling rose or it decreased? What do you think? You think it rose? Well, I see that you believe in cyclists. We will look at it. It's not that one-sided. So this is a very brief introduction of Partnerství OPS. We were founded by the Nadace Partnerství, and we are data counting on cyclopath and other infrastructures. Right now we are doing it in the automatic way. We are cooperating with EcoCounter, and right now we are trying to cooperate with Slovakia and My Bike Counter. It's a new startup. We have a lot of experience and many installations in the Czech Republic, and our main partners and clients, we can see data from Jihlava, Praha and Pardubice. I think that Prague will be covered by Horatius. So for those who don't know what the EcoCounter is, this type is used mainly in the cities, as I was talking about. It is a counter that can differentiate between cyclists and pedestrians and cars. It is used on cycle paths, and of course you can connect display panels for it, so you can show the data for the cyclists and pedestrians. Here you can see it near Vyšehrad, and the second is from Pardubice. If you are interested about this technology, you can look at our webpage, sčítače.cz, and right now we will look at the data. This is a brief introduction. We know that last year there was a first wave in the spring, then there was the second wave, which we hope it's ending right now in this year. But We will look at what was happening in the first and the second wave, because many people were able to work from home, so they were staying and working at home office. So the survey of university, I think that we've heard it already, but really this affected the data we were collecting. Okay, so Pardubice, we will look at 2 locations I picked for this presentation. On the first graph, you can see monthly data of cyclist intensity in 2019, which is the blue line, and the black line is 2020. And I've added the green line, which is 2021. As you can see under the picture, that in the first part of the year, in 2019 and 20, there is an increase. It can be because of the better weather. It was milder winter. Then there was the first wave of Covet, and then you can see that the intensity of cyclists, the numbers are decreasing. During the summer, there was a 7% decrease, and again, when there was the second lockdown, we have also again a 22% decrease. When we look at Pardubice, the possibility of working from home led to the decrease in cycling to work. If we compare 2019 and 21, we can see approximately 30% of decrease. So you can see that the trend is still the same. So the yearly change is 11% decrease. In 2019 and 2020, in the location of 17th of November, is again decrease. At the beginning of the year, there's an increase of 16%, but then the decrease is more visible. So this was Pardubice. Let's look at another, and that's Ostrava. So how it affected Ostrava? We will again look at 2 locations. Those locations have very similar year to year comparing. In Hrabova, there is the increase of cycling transportation, and as well as in Stará Bělá. There you can see in January, February, there is an increase of 20%. The second location plus 12% because there was a better weather. In Ostrava, instead of people weren't staying at home, but they would use cycle paths more. So in Hrabova, there is an increase of cycling transportation of 40% and 72% in Stará Bělá. Later in year, there is a small decrease. So as you can see, Ostrava, there's a different situation, and if you can see the comparing of 2019 and 21, there is no change, year-to-year change, and in Stará Bělá there is an increase of traffic by 14%. And then I have another city, and that is Jihlava. We are collecting data, and I wanted to show you week to week comparing, and then you can see that during COVID, during lockdown, At the beginning of the year, even the weather, even the mild weather, there were still a decrease, but then you can see there's a 80% increase of traffic. During summer, when people are leaving the city, then you can see again 50% decrease of cycle traffic. But during the second wave of COVID, there is a 9% increase in traffic. So this is very interesting. There are 3 locations, 3 cities, and different approaches. You can see that the cycling transportation, the question if it's increased or not is not that clear, so it depends on the location. It is evident that where people were using bikes for transport, for example in Ostrava, the lockdown had a negative effect, but in cities they're not so cycle-friendly. The situation is different. Then I wanted to show you another roads. Maybe the COVID, how it affected one of the locations, which we found interesting. This is a graph. Here is 2019, and the second part is 2020. The blue line is pedestrians. The black line are cyclists. And then you can see the first wave, first lockdown, where the pedestrians, really, the traffic increased almost twice as much. Then you can see summer, and the numbers of cyclists increased. And that is because people used their long cyclopath more, and they were having holidays here in the Czech Republic. So that is very interesting from a statistic point of view. When you are interested in data, we are trying to show it. We are trying to share it. For example, here at this měření návštěvnosti.cz. And then I found another important and interesting information from abroad. Maybe if you've heard something from Europe before, but there's an interesting graph. As you can see how COVID affected, again, the difference between 2019 and 2020. And then you can see that the cyclists in Great Britain, there was increased in their traffic by 50%. There you can see a graph which shows the differences between 2019 and 2020, and you can see that it is very similar to the graphs we've seen in other cities, for example, Jihlava. Here I wanted to show you, this is from colleagues from EcoCounter. And this is again comparing 19 and 20. In Europe, there are lots of counters, lots of locations in the whole of Europe. So you can see that approximately the increase is 8%. In USA, it is an increase of 16%. Weekdays, there's an increase only by 3%, but the weekends, you can see there are more increased. The increase is bigger. There you can see another graph which shows the development in Europe, which is the gray line. There's a first lockdown, and you see a big decrease in cycling transportation because people were forced to stay at home. Then in May and June, there's a big increase. and the increase is continuing throughout the summer and at the end of the year. In the USA, that's the green line. It is a different situation because people, even though they were staying at home, the traffic was increasing. There again, there's a comparing. You can see the development of cycling, transportation in winter, week by week. And again, you can see that in spring, there's a decrease. And during weekdays, but during weekends, you can see an increased because tourists and people were using bikes for recreation. There's another graph. Again, the green is Europe, and the gray one is 2019, and the green one is 2020. And you can see the most frequent hours are in 2020. The data are different, but then you can see the increased transportation in the afternoon hours. And then we can see the comparison. I think we've heard it already. There's an increase of cycling transportation in Europe. So you can see how the countries did. So this is all from me. I'm not sure what to do with the questions. We have 2 questions. Okay, so I will take the microphone to you. Hello, I would like to say about the increased, for example, whether Pardubice is an inner city, that Luboš chose the outside counters. But the second thing is that the comparing 19 and 20, the shared bicycle really saw an improving and increasing. So the city during Covet, by the operator of shared bikes, free will be only first 15%. So that may be the cause of the increase we've seen. But we have experience, and during September and October, other years we've done the counting during the June and July. So we could see a slow decrease in traffic in the outside city. But in the inner city, the traffic really increased. So that is my comment. Of course, the bike sharing really helped and helped the cycling traffic in Ostrava. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the comment. Okay, now we will go to Prague. I will ask David Horacio and show us the data for Prague.
Milé dámy, vážení pánové, já děkuji.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for having me here. I'm really happy that so many of you decided to participate. At the beginning of today's event, Mr. Deputy Mayor was talking about the situation in Prague, and I can confirm that half a year ago we were considering the decision about the future of cycling. And in terms of Prague, it was necessary to realize that there was no that there were no limits to parking in the city center, and at the same time the capital city of Prague is a self-administered area, which also affects the situation. But the measures that were taken were different from London or Bogota, because Bogota is in a different position from Prague, and the rate of cyclists is different as well. But it was also decided that the measures are sustainable, that they would be presented gradually, and they are beginning to be implemented step by step, and we will see how successful all this will be. I hope that this will be the right way forward. My colleague was talking about the development in the Czech Republic, and there was a major progress even prior to COVID, but there were also cities where it wasn't that substantial, and Prague is among those cities. You will see this in the data I'm going to present as well. However, I'm going to speak about the situation in Prague, the means that are used, and you can use it for your analyses, for your research, and for your own information. As regards data collection, some people say that Prague has more counters than the rest of the Republic combined. It is true, and that we have a large number of them, and it's the main source of information. Today, we have 29 localities with 30 counters, sometimes placed at pathways. Originally, we had 2 mobile counters out of 23 original. Today, we have 18 radars, but we are trying not to use them in order to avoid long time frames. We also have used surveys. Counters provide information about the numbers, and surveys provide information about the reasons why people use the bike, what they are afraid of, what they would welcome. Prague also uses information from mobile applications that has been used since 2017. In terms of Strava, sport information is used. In Prague, we use the information from cycling, and the data provided by the users is used for planning urban infrastructure. Another novel idea is the field use and profile surveys. So the so-called totem was applied in Prague. If you should think that this is not a too large a number, we also use profile surveys. But this is not a means that would enable us to use long-term information. As regards counters, when you take a look in the past, some of you actually may remember it, remember the fact that originally data without any cleanup were used, without any filtration. So there you can see a report, the data provided by the counters, how many cyclists actually passed the counters. But this is not the main source of information used in Prague. The majority of data, of raw data, is provided through golemio.cz, where data from a variety of areas is provided. Here you can see daily statistics from counters, their differentiation in terms of the direction, and overviews. You can have a look at comprehensive overviews based on years, days, months, and so on. Here, for instance, you can see April and so forth. On the web portal is also information on Covet. You can see a data set on Prague, and in the red oval part you can see the progress. The green curve is 2021. It's the cold April, but some other averages are still not provided, so consider this part irrelevant in the 2/3. So there is an increase by 32%. In the previous year, the increase was 60%, and we can also see that the increase at weekends was more significant than during workdays. This year, the increase is in the region of 30%. Year on year, it's a slight decline, but this depends on the weather. And this year, the weather was pretty cold in April. Here you can see some information from Totem. This data is also publicly available. Here we can see pedestrians and cyclists. Prague, as the administrator, can see the different types. Here you can see year-on-year comparison of cyclists in Podolí on the cycle path. Here you can see that in 2021, at the beginning it was quite promising, but the weather changed. And year on year, we can speak about a decline with respect to the Covet. What we make the most detailed use of are mobile navigation applications. The data is provided in Golemia, and it provides numbers through the numbers through counters. We find out about the real numbers, and we know the numbers, we actually know the direction, we can see year-on-year changes, and this has a big potential for further spread. We don't actually focus on the speeds, we don't focus on time, but all it can be used in terms of, for example, preferences of cyclists. Here you can see the network. This year displayed is from 2019 because 2020 has not been fully processed yet. This is the Napříkopech Street. We can see the number of the cyclists. We can also see the pathways. And of course, there are other outputs, such as heat maps, matrices of resources between individual parts of and conurbations. Here, for example, you can see the result and the consequences of some roadworks. What you could have seen was that such roadworks affect the overall traffic. When talking about the distribution of cyclists regarding distances, the majority of cyclists move from suburbs to the city center. And when it comes to tourists covering the distances of 25 to 35 kilometers, there is a fairly low number of them. Then actually there is also a number of people who only use the bike for short distances. We are also looking for the most suitable tracks for integration. It can also be used as an argumentation for and against negative standpoints of people who say, okay, no cyclist has ever been here, but the evidence says something different. Here you can see the resulting intensity and how that affected our design. These are the two-way cycle paths. You can see streets, numbers of cyclists. There are also some illegal cyclists. But you can also see that no accident occurred in that area. When it comes to counting cyclists in Prague, it is necessary to publish the data. You can find this data online on tsk-praha.cz, but it's also an extensive publication. We also disclose the data as press releases. It is also possible to download it through OpenAPI, operated by DP Golemio. Here, there are some outcomes prepared for the deputy of our institution. Here you can see the beginning of anti-pandemic measures, and you can see the number of cyclists during weekends and work days. Here, in the week 11, this is basically the beginning of the lockdown, and you can see the differences between the years. That's all from my side, and I hope that I followed the time limit. Thank you very much for your time. Well, you did follow the time limit, but still, we are running late. Never mind. Unless there are any questions, we are definitely going to hold a discussion later, but now we are going to have two presentations on the evaluation of two cities, the comparison of Germany and the Czech Republic. We are going to speak about the perspective of an everyday user. Now I'd like to ask Thomas Böhmer to step in. He represents the German cycling club from Dresden. Well, he wanted to come to Prague, but he would have to go to quarantine. So as a result of that, he decided not to join us. Are you with us?
See your presentation.
Do you see my presentation?
Yeah. Yes. Do
you see me?
We can see you. Yeah, I can see you in a small window, but...
Small window?
Okay. Yeah, well, I can see you on my screen, but not on the big screen. Dá se to udělat, aby byl i Tomas součástí té prezentace, jako jste to měli předtím? Nebo to musí udělat on? Jo, dobře. Okay, Thomas. Yeah, we can go ahead.
And it's okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then we can start with the presentation. Yeah, welcome from my side. I would like to introduce the German Fahrrad-Klimatest, translated bicycle climate test. And this is an application which we also have in Czech Republic. And for this reason, I would like to introduce the Fahrrad-Klimatest from Germany and also some measures and some data from Germany present. Yeah, just to give a short introduction, of course, we have through COVID-19 influence on cycling. We have seen this in the previous papers and presentations, and this will increase bicycle use, or has increased bicycle use, and also the image of cycling in all the countries in Europe. And this will also influence the political will for cycling, and this will have influence on new targets for cycling development. This is also our point, because we have a method to give information about the benchmarking or evaluation, or the no, I have a problem with my screen. Cannot. No. Okay, so we have we can measure the feeling of cyclists, and this will or can be used to see if the targets are fulfilled. And this is the method. We have the method of the ADFC Fahrrad-Klimatest, and the idea is that cyclists assess their cycling environment. The cyclists are experts by daily experience. They know best what is cycling like in their hometown, and they can tell us. And we have a questionnaire with 27 questions in 5 categories. And there we have all the important informations about the cycling, and we call it cycling climate. All the conditions for cycling all together, this is the cycling climate for us. The bicycle climate test had been introduced in 1988, and since 2012 we have the survey all 2 years, and so we have a good row of data where we can see how the conditions for cycling have developed and will develop. The rules. Every cyclist can participate. This is not always an easy thing, because if everybody can participate, you have a self-selecting sample. You have not a good sample, but the characteristics of our survey sample is that the men and women, or frequent cyclists or not frequent cyclists, they all evaluate their city in the same way and assess their city in the same way. And so it's all right that every cyclist can participate and the data is still good. The application or the questionnaire is implemented everywhere at the same time. We have a 3-month period, and the information about the survey is distributed in a wide way by bicycle activists, also by the cities, media, and all other people who are interested in cycling. The minimum requirement for the publication of results is 50 participants. That means if we have less than 50 participants, we give no data about the city quality, and this helps us to define the quality of the data. We have a 6-point scale from 1 to 6. We will see it on the next slide. And we rank the results in 6 city size classes. That means each city is divided, or all the cities are divided into 6 city size classes. And this is the sample section of the questionnaire. On the left side, you have good positive statements about cycling in the city. On the right side, you have negative statements, and the participant can decide whether to choose the left side or the right side in this 27 questions. Yes, the number of participants has increased very much since 1988. We have started with 4,000 participants, and in 2018 we had 166,000 participants. And through COVID, or due to COVID, we have a even higher increase to 2020. Now we have 225,000 participants in the survey. And that means we have data for over 1,000 cities in Germany where we can say this is the number of bicycle friendliness of this city. We have one survey, but 3 effects of the survey. The survey is a public relation tool and brings high media attention to all fields of open public. And the media contacts were 100 million in 2016 and even more in 2020. We don't measure it anymore, but it's really everywhere, the information about the results of the Fahrradklimatest. And the Fahrradklimatest, in the same way as a participation tool, it can activate citizens to be involved in city planning and policy on a very low level. And the survey is also a rating tool, which allows monitoring and benchmarking of the city level, as well as identification of strong and weak points of local cycling policy. This is our Minister of Transport, he has presented the results in 2020. So it shows a really high media presence of the data. And the results will be displayed on a map view. Here you can see all the 1,024 cities, and you see how the cities are good rated. So you see on the borderline to the Netherlands, the good results, which show green color, are situated. And for each of the cities, we have individual records where you can see the main features of the city and also the points of the strengths and weaknesses of the city. You can see what are the best evaluated questions and the worst evaluated questions for each city. But the question is, what do we measure? We are somehow on this scale between objectivity and subjectivity. So we try to force the people to be a daily expert and to be very objective in their assessment of the city. But of course, they also have an opinion and they bring in their subjectivity. And on the end, we have a perception of cycling of the city, what we measure. But on the other hand, we also have wishes and expectations of these people. If the people see what is possible in Amsterdam, they will get more expectations, and this will influence their assessment. And so in the end, what we measure is the customer satisfaction with cycling. So how satisfied are the cyclists with their cycling planning policy? We see that the data of the bicycle climate test is very good if we compare it with objective data. The most objective data to me is the model share of cycling, and we have very good data from the Technical University in Dresden, which measure the model share of cycling. And we see that the city which has the most or has the highest share of cycling, Karlsruhe, has also the best grades in the bicycle climate test. That means it's the most bicycle friendly main city in Germany. And we also do network building on bicycle benchmarking tools. Here's a picture from 2017 at the Velocity conference in Arnhem-Nijmegen. And we have many people who transferred the German method to other countries. And here you see what the influence was, that the application started in Austria, Switzerland very early in 2016 in the Czech Republic, and also 2 years ago in the Netherlands and Sweden. We have the Fahrradklimatest methodology implemented. Now to the data in Germany. You see here the development of the assessment of the cities, and you see that the brown lines, the dark brown lines, these are the small cities, and you see that small cities will be evaluated better than the big cities. So the cycling conditions are felt better in small cities. And on the other hand, you see that the development of bicycle friendliness in Germany is not very good. So from 2012 to 14, it increased a little bit, but then the level of bicycle friendliness decreased. And there's only one exemption, and this is the city size class more than 500,000 inhabitants. From 2018 to 2020, we had a strong increase in bicycle friendliness in these cities. So we had really seen that that many people used the bike and they felt more bicycle friendliness in their city. This is a special survey about Corona and biking we implemented in the last test in 2020. And here you see that in most cities, the grades are from 1.0 to 6. 6 is graded very bad. 1 is very good. It's like the school grades. And you see that signals for and change in biking and good measurements like pop-up bike lanes were only implemented in the big cities, and in the small cities not so much has happened. But the importance of bike ride has really increased. So the people that, especially in the big cities, that the importance has increased and new bike destinations had been discovered through COVID-19. Yes, and this is the result in Berlin. You see that in Berlin, pragmatic pop-up infrastructure had been established, and this had been valued by the people which assessed Berlin, and so Berlin got a special or was awarded with a prize for COVID-19 measurements. Okay, that's my paper, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. I will see if there are any questions. I would like to ask you, what's your experience? How do the cities react when they see the results? Are they like responding to the needs of the users? Can you give us example? For example, I don't know, your city, Dresden, if they work really with the results?
Yeah, there are not many cities which work really with the results. I would think it's about 10%, but the high media attention brings really the results to the city people, and all the people will even or especially the media will bring the results to the people, and also the people who work with the data and who do bicycle planning in the city, they use the data then.
Okay, tak já teďka navážu. We will continue now with the Czech experience with the cyclobarometer of my colleague Michal Šindelář. Michal, ještě tak pojď. Představ, jak je ta situace, protože český barometr se dělá vlastně každý rok, takže...
So let us see what the survey looks like in Czech Republic, because we do it every year. Good morning, my name is Michal Šindelář. I come from the Partnership Foundation, and I will talk to you about Cyclobarometer, the survey. This is a picture from our website, and our foundation is here already 30 years, and we aim to bring new solutions for problems so that Czech Republic is more livable and sustainable. We, for example, brought the topic of public spaces, and we brought it into the mainstream discussion. And now we try to talk a lot about sustainable mobility, and our foundation hopes to bring it into the mainstream discussion as well. So now I would like to talk about Cyclobarometer. Can I switch the slides myself? Okay. Cyclobarometer is the survey here that is it is connected to other project. We actually copied it from the German survey. About 6 years ago, our foundation brought it to Czech Republic, and now the topic is moved towards our daughter company. And the town that wins in the Cyclobarometer will get a free counter for about 3 weeks. Then we, of course, have the campaign of cycling to work, and we actually partnered with this initiative so that people can fill out our survey online. And the survey also is used to give the award of Cycling City of the Year, and it goes to the most progressive city as for cycling in Czech Republic, and it is connected again with the initiative Cycling to Work. We collect our data in May or April. Maybe some of you know whether you were able to fill out the survey, but the minimal requirement is 25 participants for each city, and the winner city gets a counter for 3 months for free. It is a copy of the Fahrradklimatest from Germany. Again, there are four different categories. There is the safety, comfort, and the connections of the infrastructure in the city. This is what the questions look like. You have seen a similar thing in the previous presentation. So you can rate it from 1 to 6, and then we get the final rating. This survey has started in 1988 in Germany, and I think it is the same questions for quite a long time. And for us this year, we have it's been the 6th year in Czech Republic, and the good thing is that we can compare between years and between different countries. However, sometimes the questions do not reflect the reality. We ask about safety in our survey, but we, for example, ask whether there are conflicts between car drivers and cyclists. But there has been an important question of keeping distance between cyclists and cars. So it would be interesting to ask specifically about this topic. And we have also seen that the political support is very important, and there are very big differences between Czech cities in the political support, and that has a real impact on the cycling infrastructure in specific cities. So we should be asking ourselves how to improve the support, but it is also a question of comparing this internationally. I have made a figure that shows us how many participants we had. Of course, there are different participants, so the participants can choose themselves what they will fill out. We can see that it is about between 1,000 and 2,000 participants. We will see what will be the result this year, because this year we expect a lot of participants. And we, of course, need at least 25 participants for each city, and that means that there are between 13 and 16 cities that get a rating from us. This is how the data looks like in the end, and you can find it on our website. And I just wanted to show you a quick overview. There are some interesting points. There is a problem in the rating because the rating is subjective. People say how they feel, and there is a big difference between the ratings. Břeclav has 3.26 or 3.4, which is about average. But whoever is from Břeclav, like me, for example, we know that everyone cycles there and the infrastructure is good and safe. But in our survey, when we got rating for Břeclav, it seems that the rating is bad. So it is strange that there is a difference between how the infrastructure looks like and what the rating is. There is a difference there. The three dots up there are from Ústí nad Labem. And it is probably one of the worst cities for cycling. And actually, it really is among the worst cities. And mostly the second worst are Brno or Plzeň. But we can see that these cities are in different categories as for comfort, but the subjective perception is very different. So there is also a relation between the amount of cyclists on the road and the perceived comfort and safety. This is my last slide, I think. We have a lot of things that we need to do. Thomas talked about the media attention in Germany, and also in Czech Republic we can communicate with the media much better. However, we do not have any media strategy or PR strategy. Then there is also the question about collaboration with municipalities, because the city can assess how people feel on the roads, and they could set their own goals, what the municipality wants to achieve, and then take some steps to fill these goals, to achieve these goals. And also our survey would need a financial partner, because we do not have much funding, and it could lead to a much broader data collection if we had a bit more funding. We want to follow the German model, where the data collection is happening in real life as well. And a bit of context at the end. I took it from the presentation from Thomas, what it looked like in Germany at the beginning. And you can see that they just have 30 years history, but we are now about at the point where the green circle was. So we hope that we will continue in the trend that we can see in Germany in the history of the survey. And that is all from me. Thank you very much.
Michale, díky moc.
Michal, thank you very much. And I'm very happy that it is conducted, this survey, because as you've seen, Prague has a lot of data, and we need to see it and we need to hear it from people who are really in the city, in the traffic. And many people are afraid of the high traffic in Prague, because there's the public transport and trams. If you know Prague, you see that it is very different from, for example, Hradec Králové. So the situation is really different. There will be one presentation from Sweden in the afternoon. Michal Kautsky will present how Sweden are using this data collected. Well, what time is it? We have a question. Michal, you were talking about Břeclav. I wanted to ask how the transport of cyclists, how the cyclists what part of cycling is in Břeclav, for example, in comparison with Holland, and how the infrastructure is affected, for example, in comparison with other cities. And in short, in Břeclav, there's less and less people cycling, and people are they like to travel by car. It is similar to Prague because people are richer, and so it means that the elderly usually are traveling by bike. So people could be cycling, but they are. I think that Břeclav is missing the right time for action. Břeclav has no public counter, no promotion of cycling, and I think that the soft measures is what is the problem, because there is an infrastructure, but there is no priority. There could be infrastructure, and it means that the cyclist will get through the crossroads. But I think that Břeclav is really missing the opportunity here. Well, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, we will have lunch. We will meet here again 13:15. There is a catering next to the cafe. So if you want to go with us in the afternoon for the road, you can use. So 13:15 here again. Thank you very much.